All right. Hi there, everyone. 2 words to begin this podcast today. Oh, yeah. It's typically
Are you talking about me or our guest?
Well, oh, no. You know I'm not talking about you, Sal. That's typically how I greet Matt Parrino when I see him at One Bills Drive or in the press box. And we are thrilled to have him today. Matt Parrino of Syracuse.com covers the Bills on the beat, the Shout podcast. He's kind of a pioneer, Sal, in the podcast realm. You know?
He is a mega star in the podcast world with his 45 million subscribers and all that. We only hope to be close at some point to Parrino's franchise over there.
Here's what I predict. In the next 5 years, this podcast is going to be among the leaders on the charts.
5 years.
Once everybody gets to know the magnitude of Sal's personality and the way that there's so many things that are just so joyful and positive. People are just going to be coming from the hills all over.
5 years. You think I'm going to be doing this in 5 years? Seriously?
Dude, that's literally what we talk about all the time.
Do you know how old I am?
Yeah. I've told you this several times, Sal. You are not allowed to retire because I do not subscribe to that press room without you. So Adam already did it. Right. He did it without my approval, but that's neither here nor there.
No, that's too strong a word. The R word is too strong a word. But you know what the funny thing is? I mean, I had the sort of the working with Sal experience all those years ago when WGRZ and the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle were owned by the same company. And so we would do like a couple of hits every week. Right. And it was granted in the midst of a 17-year playoff drought that we did this. But, and I'm like a glutton for punishment because this opportunity came up and I turned right back to him. All of his
he knew a good thing.
Enthusiasm and all that positive vibe. But all right, Matt, seriously, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you two are headed for Foxboro and the regular season finale. As we record this on Friday, you guys will be traveling tomorrow. So let's just kind of quickly hit on, and Matt, we'll start with you. The idea that Terrell Bernard, I think we all, when we saw that quad injury, were like, whoa, wait a minute, and could easily think back to last year and the impact that had, his injury and being out for the Kansas City game in particular. The fact that he's expected now back for the postseason, that's a very positive thing, very important for this Buffalo defense.
I mean, that is literally the storyline that has to stay the way that it is if the Bills want to make a Super Bowl run. They're literally probably the healthiest team going into the playoffs. And I mean, if you're a Bills fan, you're knocking on all the wood because this hasn't been the case the last couple of years. And Bernard, last year in the biggest game against the Chiefs, they end up losing by 1 score. If he's on the field, that game probably looks a lot different. So getting Bernard back for this kind of game. And here's the thing. Even if he's not available in the wild card round, it's a quad injury. You hope he can kind of work his way back in between week to week, day to day. It's more important that he's available in the divisional round when you're going to go up against probably the Baltimore Ravens. They could probably get past the Denver Broncos, but you want as many of your guys, the guys that you lean on. This is their defensive captain.
Yeah, I thought that was big news today when McDermott said that I was not expecting him because he had already told us Bernard's going to be out. And when he said the other day, it's between day to day and week to week, then you're thinking, wait a minute, he's couching himself a little bit and protecting against that. But when he came out today and said that he's probably going to play next week, that was the best news you could have heard because he said it, Matt said it. Last year, they missed him so much and that they probably, I don't know, I think they probably would have beaten the Chiefs if Bernard had played and A.J. Klein was back in the RV heading to wherever he was supposed to be going on vacation. So that was good news. That was the best news you could have heard today. Also, it looked like everybody else is going to play, as far as those questionable guys. So that's good. Get DeMar Hamlin back out there and get his feet wet again for the playoff game. I thought it was a pretty encouraging, little session there from McDermott this morning.
Yeah, no question. I shared this with Sal the other day, Matt, but I'll share it with you now. Vic Carucci and I were recording something for Channel 2 in Buffalo before the divisional playoff game against Kansas City last year. We were using the post-game media room there in the stadium, and I was walking back up the tunnel as the teams were coming out for pregame. And a longtime source of mine or whatever, we kind of said hello in the tunnel and kind of whispered in my ear, that Bernard injury brought it right up and said that's tough because they knew from a matchup standpoint, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think your point is well taken in terms, especially with some of the shortcomings we've seen on that defense, and it's an obvious concern, and we'll talk about that a bit. But the idea that he's back, very, very good news. Also today, little news: the Mike White elevation from the practice squad. Kind of seems like reasons prevailed there a little bit, given the fact they're going to give Josh the start in this game, right?
Yeah, and I think this is also a move for looking ahead to the playoffs. If you have a third quarterback on your active roster, you can make them eligible to play as an emergency quarterback, which I think is a huge deal. If Allen goes down in the game, Mitch Trubisky comes in, and we've seen some Mitch Trubisky over the years, and it's not going well, you could pivot to Mike White in a close game. Now, is that going to get you over the top? I'm not so sure, but it gives them another option. And Nicholas Morrow, how valuable has the guy really been? This is like his third stint on the roster. They're probably going to bring him back to the practice squad, which would be my best guess. And they're pretty healthy at linebacker. You're going to get Dorian Williams back to where you need him to be. Bernard, if he's able to go next week and he's at the level of health that you need. And the interesting thing about Bernard is we're going to get to really see Joe Andreessen this week. Everybody's so excited about him. Now, I don't think you want to have to lean on him in the playoffs, but getting him more reps, that's not a bad thing, because as you get into the playoffs, they need to rely on him at that backup middle linebacker spot, with Balin Spector now expected to be out for the season. These are some pretty important reps on Sunday for the rookie.
Yeah, I
agree
with that.
I'm a little confused. Maybe you can clear this up for me. The third quarterback on Sunday. So White is on the 53, and if they have him active for the game, he's the emergency quarterback, right?
So,
but doesn't Josh have to be hurt and Trubisky for White to go in?
So my guess for this Sunday is he will be active. So once he's active, you can play all three quarterbacks any way that you want. In the playoffs, he wouldn't take any of those active spots. Then he would only be able to go in. So I guess technically he would only be able to go in if Mitch Trubisky gets hurt. But I think you're protecting yourself against that once the playoffs start. And listen, it's a matchup-driven league. Depending on how things shake out for an individual game, maybe you prioritize that if you're just having somebody come up for a jersey. We've seen that so many times this year. They got to get creative with it, to your point, Sal. But I think we're definitely going to probably see Mike White this Sunday.
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
And I think that's what I was kind of driving at. So they're going to have to waste a spot on Mike White, as opposed to, having a fourth offensive lineman who you want to get in there. They're going to have to use that spot on a guy that could have filled in somewhere else. I was a little bit surprised by that, but because Adam and I had talked the other day. Josh goes in, hands off 3 times, he's done. Trubisky finishes the game. But if he were to get hurt, which is kind of unlikely because they're going to play it so vanilla, I told Adam they would just put Josh back in and literally have him hand off every play until the end of the game. So he's not going to get hurt. So I was thinking, why would you waste a spot on Mike White when you can get another player in and sit another player? That was what confused me this morning.
There's going to be a lot of guys that don't play in this game that are going to be active, but don't actually go into the game. And because of the roster gymnastics, and you only elevate 2 guys off the practice squad anyway, you'd have to do even more gymnastics. And I think this is also like a nod to a guy that, whether you agree with it or not, they love the guy. They gave him a 1-year contract extension today as well. They want him a part of the long-term process. He's like the modern day Davis Webb, right? Like in that locker room, like in the quarterback room. They don't have the I don't think they have the bubble hockey thing anymore, but he's in there doing all the other stuff. As a matter of fact, I think Allen took him, Trubisky, and Buechele to one of the World Series Yankees games because White's a huge Yankee fan. So him and Allen are super tight.
I think too.
What's that?
Does he get my newsletter?
We got to get him out Wednesday or after the game in Foxboro. Make sure Mike White subscribes.
Speaking of positive vibes, Sal on the Yankees, that's its own separate, situation. But when I said reason prevailed for Sunday, the scenario that Sal just painted, where Josh comes in, takes a snap or two or whatever, gets the hell out of there. If Trubisky were to get hurt, I want nothing to do with Josh Allen going back in the game, right? I think most people would agree with that, even if it is just a handoff. In fact, I respect the streak and everything and understand why they're doing this, and I think Allen's earned that. I would just assume have him bubble wrapped. I'd have him up in the box or something with Joe Brady. I just, I understand why they're doing it. But my point is, protect your asset, your most important asset, to the greatest absolute degree you can. And for all the long-term ramification, Matt, that you brought up, all of it legit, they're also taking care of that in the short term, I think.
For sure. And I'm actually more on your side. Like, I'm just not risking anything when you have this kind of opportunity ahead of you over the next 4 weeks to, chance it. And I get it. The Iron Man record is super cool, and I get it. But, like, how many World Series did Cal Ripken win, Sal?
0.
0, right? And the Iron Man thing is cool, but that's all he's got.
Did he win one? Did he win the one? Did they win it?
I was going to the baseball historian.
I think
he won the one. Yeah,
he won the one.
So he won the one.
83. Yeah.
So, I mean, so what do I know? He's more known for the Iron Man thing than he is for the Super Bowl. So maybe Josh Allen is onto something. And I don't think he's doing it just personally. I think it's just part of being available, part of being a tough, durable player. And there's a lot of quarterbacks at the top that have missed a lot of time. I mean, Joe Burrow has missed a season. Lamar Jackson has missed playoff games. Like, Josh Allen does everything he can to get onto the field, and I think they weren't going to keep him off. But I'm with you, Adam. Like, if he gets hurt in any type of way on Sunday, you're just going to be absolutely beside yourself.
Look, you guys are being wusses. Come on. He's going to go out there for a series, hand off to James Cook a few times. Maybe he'll throw a quick screen pass, and he'll be out. He's not going to get hurt. They're going to protect him.
All right.
Really?
All right.
Are you really, really, really worried about this?
You've made your point. No.
I'm just saying.
I'm not losing sleep over it.
I'm not losing sleep over it either. In a perfect world, I just don't play him, but whatever.
All right. Move on.
Okay.
Next topic.
If it weren't for the streak, he absolutely wouldn't even remotely see the field, I guess is the point. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Next, like a la Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. I guess that's the point. All right. Next up, let's keep it with Josh Allen. And because, Matt, we haven't had you on. I think you jumped in the preseason with Sal at one point. And I just, am beyond moved and impressed with, like, the progress that he's shown this year. And if you want to chime in on the MVP thing or whatever,
Sal?
go with whatever way. That's a good point. I can only be referring to one person. No, seriously. You want to chime in on the MVP front and all of that? Feel free here. Sal and I have repeatedly said, I mean, he's so much more sort of refined now. Like the maturity we've seen from him, what he's been able to do in big moments, in big situations, athletically and everything else. But relative to the stats, I mean, I think he's better because some of the numbers are down, actually, in what he's doing within the framework of this offense. Just your overall take on how Allen has, after moving on from Stephon Diggs, kind of found a new and higher gear this year.
Yeah, and I think like the offense scoring, making the franchise record for points this year with this collection of players, when the narrative all offseason was how lousy the offense was around Josh Allen, and they're going to go down in the history books as the best Bills offense that there's ever been. I think just that achievement is worthwhile to push the MVP narrative. But this goes back to 2022. I think he was at the peak of his powers on the road against the Kansas City Chiefs, going absolutely nuclear in every single way in that fourth quarter. And it didn't matter. Like, in the end, it didn't matter. Like, there weren't enough things that happened. And now listen, Sean McDermott had a role in that. The defense had a role in that. Sure. But I think just the idea, whether it was Brian Dable before Dorsey continuing the message, and then Brady really actualizing all of the messaging that I think Josh has had since his early in his career, has finally kind of clicked, and he's found a way to really take care of the ball. And the interceptions is so impressive. But to me, the real stat that jumps out to me is how little he's put the ball in jeopardy as a runner. Because early in his career, those fumbles were absolutely killers in the run game. He just does not give the other team's offense any extra possessions. And that's so critical. He's so good in the red zone. I think he's the greatest. I agree with it. I can't remember who said it, maybe Dan Orlovsky or whoever. I think he's the greatest red zone weapon in the history of football. Like, there's no way, it's a tush push. It's as a scrambler, as we saw in the Kansas City game, the way that he goes through his reads as a passer and buys time in the pocket and he doesn't get sacked. There's so much to like about what he is. And he doesn't have a Derrick Henry. He doesn't have a first-round wide receiver like Zay Flowers and even Rashad Bateman, who was a first-rounder as well. He doesn't have the 8 Pro Bowlers that are around Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. I think either guy is deserving of the award. I think if you really want to make an argument for Saquon Barkley, I'd listen to it because he's been arguably the greatest force and change things for Philadelphia. There were people thinking that Philadelphia was going to fall off the cliff this year. Like Nick Sirianni was on the hot seat early in the season. And I think the way they've kind of found themselves and behind Saquon Barkley, you can make that argument too. But for me, it's Josh Allen, who's the MVP. The one thing I will say is I'm so over the conversation at this point because it's become so like just toxic, like the way people are kind of framing it and talking about it. There's so many extra layers to it, which I guess that's just modern sports talk because, social media and everything else.
Yeah, we're tired of the MVP talk too, and we all agree he should be the winner this season. And I think it was kind of telling when the Pro Bowl votes came out yesterday that he's the starting quarterback for the AFC. Not that the Pro Bowl means anything, but there is a little bit of crossover, I think, with the media that votes for that. I think there's media that's I don't vote.
No. It's coaches, players, and fans.
Yeah, so there's no media there?
No media for Pro Bowl.
Used to be the media used to be involved with that. Anyways, he's the starting quarterback ahead of Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, even though they have better statistical numbers. That's kind of an indication of how the MVP vote is going to be. People are going to recognize that it isn't all about the numbers this year. It is about the 13-3 record. And like Matt said, playing with a lesser team in terms of overall talent. And let's face it, preseason expectations. The Ravens were the number 1 seed last year in the playoffs in the AFC, and they blew it. They lost. The Bills coming into this season, so they were a highly respected team coming in. The Bills were not a highly respected team coming in. People had the Jets or the Dolphins winning the division this year, not the Bills. And look what's happened. So those factors alone should push him over the top in the MVP balloting.
Yeah. And speaking of, I think we all agree on that. And speaking of rosters with lesser talent, which is a reference that Sal just made there, I want to change the subject to the defense. And I guess I'd frame it this way, Matt. And Sal and I have talked about this at length here on this show. How much of a concern is this defense for you? As impressive as it was in the win over the Jets, obviously, I think we all recognize the trends and some of the shortcomings in the areas of vulnerability. As you project now toward the postseason, how much of a kind of a yellow flag is some of that stuff for you?
I mean, you're worried about them as defending the run. I think in the red zone defensively, the last quarter of the season, they weren't as good as traditionally Sean McDermott coach defenses have been. I think there's been a lot of learning, growing pains for Bobby Babich in the second half of the season. And it feels like Sean is happy with the development late in the season in that area. So we'll see how that plays out. Here's the thing though. At all 3 position groups, whether it's defensive line, linebacker, and cornerback, you have one player that I think can be a difference maker from week to week. I think you have Greg Rousseau, who can be a difference maker. The old Matt Milano, I mean, he's a guy that everybody was waiting to come back. I think we saw the first signs of the old Matt Milano last week against the Jets. Yeah. Projecting that over the course of the playoffs, that's a whole different story. But we know the ceiling, and even Bernard is really important. Christian Benford, guys, he's been one of the best cornerbacks in football. This story is just not getting enough run. And, obviously he got no Pro Bowl love, wasn't even voted an alternate. He's giving up the lowest passer rating in the league, second lowest passer rating in the league, to Patrick Surtain, who is going to be first team All-Pro on everybody's ballot. As a matter of fact, I was listening to the Athletic Football Show. They have Surtain as their NFL Defensive Player of the Year. And Christian Benford is a tick below what Surtain has been in that Denver defense. So I think you have those 3 guys that you got to lean on and hope that you could just piss off your defensive line enough in the pregame meetings. I don't think they're having any problem getting up for Baltimore because all you got to do is throw on that tape from week 4. And I think you're going to see a very motivated group up front to go out and make a statement that they aren't going to get run over because Sal knows, Adam, that's going to be the thing that comes up all of that week on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. They're going to have to answer all of those questions, and then they're going to have to go out and prove it against them at home, which I think is so critical. They needed that Baltimore game at home. They can go to Kansas City. Can they win that game? We'll see. And we could talk about that, but that's almost like a divisional game at this point. To slay the Ravens, who they've struggled against the last couple times they played against them, I think having it in Buffalo is a huge advantage.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that was what the whole number 2 seed was about, right? They couldn't screw around and blow that, so they took care of it last week. That's good. I still think it's a bad matchup for the Bills, whether it's in Baltimore or Buffalo. We've all discussed this amongst ourselves. I don't know what it is about that team. They're so physical, but we're jumping ahead of things here. Let's concern ourselves with whoever they're going to play next week. Well, I'll ask you because we've already had this discussion, but do you have a preference? Denver, Miami, Cincinnati?
Well, I think Miami at this point because Tua looks like he's really hurt. I mean, hearing him talk about that hip injury today out of the Miami locker room, it does not sound good. I mean, he said it was worse. It's been worse than the one he had in college. It's like the worst one. I guess it's the worst NFL injury he's had to deal with, which, I mean, this was really under the radar. I didn't even really know about this until at the last minute he missed last week's game. So it doesn't seem like he's on track to even play or they'd be comfortable putting him out there. So if somehow Denver loses to the KC backups, to me, you're praying that Miami wins because I just don't think you want anything to do with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, if the Bengals win their game, and then Denver ends up losing, you're damn right. You're rooting for the Dolphins because I'm with you. I think Adam agrees. We don't want Joe Burrow in here in a point-for-point shootout because I don't trust the Bills' defense. And in a playoff game, all it's going to take is one mistake, one more mistake than the other team makes. And if you're facing a team that can score like you can, that's a trouble. That's a recipe for disaster for the Bills. So, yeah, I would take Miami. But overall, Tua aside, I still think Denver's the team because I don't like the law of averages, Matt. Yeah, I know they've owned Miami, but at some point it's going to happen, and you sure as hell don't want it to have it happen in January in Buffalo. Can you imagine the Bills' season ending at the hands of the Dolphins? That would be no. If they lose to Denver, I think Bills fans could live with that. Or they would piss them off, but they could live with it. But losing to Miami here, I don't even think you want to tempt fate.
Well, you don't have to look too far back in the Skylar Thompson game, right? That would tell you what can happen. And the Denver matchup, I respect the hell out of that defense, right? Yeah. But if the Bills protect the football, I mean, you have to like the matchup at quarterback there with a Josh Allen going against a rookie in Knicks, right? I mean, I think that clearly swings the pendulum in Buffalo's favor.
Sean McDermott will be licking his chops to go up against Bo Nix at home in the wild card round. Right. And what's funny about him is he just has not been good this year against pressure. And as good as that offensive line has been, I think the Bills can do some things to really frustrate him. So, yeah, I mean, Denver, Miami, however it shakes out, I think the worst case scenario in terms of like planning a Super Bowl run is, can they beat Cincinnati? Sure. Can they beat Baltimore? Sure. KC? Sure. But having to do it 3 consecutive weeks to get there, that's about the hardest that you can make it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So that's kind of where things stand right now with the team. Mr. Parrino, do you drive or fly to Foxboro?
I am flying to Boston, actually. They got the direct flight, heading out there with our good bud Skursky. Yep. He's a big Boston guy, so we'll go see some things. We always invite Sal. He never reads. He leaves our text on red. Doesn't respond. He's at his Hampton Inn somewhere near the stadium. I see him on Sunday morning. We knock it up. We take a couple laps around the facility, and then we get to covering the game. But he said he used to party it up in the old days, but he's not willing to. And by the way, I say partied up. Me and Skursky are in our 40s. We go out, have dinner, we have a drink or two, and we go back to our house on most nights. Let me just say this, though, before we close this thing down. We talked about the Allen MVP thing, right? I feel like it's such a cool arc of a story. Where the season started with Sal Mayorana at the training camp press conference asking Brandon about Josh Allen being the most overrated player, and that quote that will play on highlight reels forever if he wins this MVP or potentially goes to the Super Bowl, potentially wins the Super Bowl. Like, that was such a great question and exchange and the way that Brandon answered it. And it set up the stage for this whole season and the way that this Bills offense is kind of taken off. I want to give a little kudos to my beat partner there.
That was funny when he said that, because rarely do you get an honest moment like that from a person in power in the NFL, a coach, a GM, and he was raw that day. It was great the way he reacted, and he had good reason to, because anybody who thought, whoever this executive was, who honestly thought that Josh Allen was overrated, really was kind of an idiot. So he had the perfect quote, and it was nice to see him, share that honesty with the media as opposed to lying through their teeth like they usually do when they talk to us about stuff like that.
And above and beyond all else, actions speak louder than words. And has that ever been the case with Josh Allen this year? All right, you guys enjoy the trip over there. Matt, that's my stomping grounds, the Boston area, by the way.
Yeah. All right.
Bridgewater, about 2-3 towns away from Foxboro.
We're
That's an
staying
awful
in,
long time ago.
Shoot, we're staying in. It starts with a C. In Boston, you got
Cambridge.
No. Come on, Adam. You got it. Oh, Copley Place.
Oh, Copley Place. That's
yeah, the big expense accounts.
Right.
Those guys,
Right.
I forgot.
Yeah, that's Sal. That's Back Bay, man.
Yeah, that's big time.
The smile on Parrino's face tells you all you need to know.
By the way, I won't be at a Hampton Inn. At my hotel
What?
my hotel is the same hotel I've been going to for 30 years in Dedham. It's the Hilton in Dedham, which is a great little location.
This is breaking news. Everybody this is alarming to me. I'd have never.
Why breaking news? I've been there every year for 35 years. So
all right.
Why doesn't it surprise me? I was going to say, why doesn't it surprise me that Sal Mayoran is set in his ways? It doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
Love it.
All right, guys. Hey, listen, thanks very much. And Matt, little free plug time here. Again, people can read you at Syracuse.com and also the Shout podcast.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing that for?
Coming up on 5 years.
It's big. I mean, these guys are doing live shows at like Turning Stone and everything, Sal.
Yeah.
I know. They're big time.
Sal came out to a live show. Gotta get
Adam. We're like in AA right now compared to these guys. We're not even close.
Yep.
We're not even sniffing the major leagues yet.
Listen, we're catching our second win, third, fourth, fifth win, whatever it is for both of us. We've been around for a while. All right, Matt Parrino. Again, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it. Look forward to the coverage. Sal, same to you. And I am Adam Benini. Thanks everyone for being with us here on Believe in Bills.